Primetime returns with our panel. More on this topic, and we want to know what you think. Tell us at albertaprimetime.com, and we'll have your opinions after our panels. Stay with us. You're watching Alberta Primetime. Welcome back to Alberta Primetime and our discussion on the challenge of integrating cultures in our province. The discussion started with the murders of nearly 30 Somali men in 4 years in a suspected drug trade in Alberta. And Ahmed Hussen from the Canadian Somali Congress just telling us about the difference in assistance offered to newly arrived immigrants versus maybe youth in particular, in the Somali instance, who are second or third generation. And criminologist Joanne Meinecker here from McEwen University. Is that part of the problem for you in your mind?
Well, there's lots of perceptions that maybe we have to step back and look at. I mean, certainly when there's bloodshed and there's violence, with good reason, Albertas might be fearful. But this fearful other, this them, is what I want to break down. That perhaps if we could look at some more community-driven solutions that involve all groups of Albertans rather than just specific groups, it becomes easier to move away from viewing one group as the problem, because certainly it's not a Somali youth problem or a Somali violence problem. And as long as we focus our attention all around that, we lose sight, I think, of more creative strategies where we all come together rather than divide.
Is it more a case, too, of youth maybe who are at risk, vulnerable because they aren't fitting in with society, that if a culture is insular, these just happen to be the people that they know, that they're associating with? It's not a cultural thing, it's more just a circumstance.
Yeah. Well, what tools, what resources do you have to use? And on the streets, violence can become a tool. Certainly in the drug trade, it can become something that you can use to, get further ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you seeing, Suzanne, in your work at the Edmonton's Welcome Centre? Is it the length of assistance that's our problem? People sort of drop off the radar after a year?
3 years.
Okay.
It's kind of expected that 3 years is what it takes for newcomers to adapt, to get their good job, to get their language level up and all that. And we're seeing that that's just completely unreasonable for most newcomers. But the identity issue, I'd like to go back to what you were saying.
Sure.
I feel like it's not going from the community to the mainstream. There has to be some bridging that happens, and some work to develop a sense of identity so that bridging can happen from within the community. Yeah. And that's what takes a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that lasts into the second generation. I think there's an identity issue that's coming out that's playing itself out among these second generation Somali.
Ahmed, yeah. Let me read a Facebook message for you, Ahmed, from one of our Alberta Primetime viewers. What are new immigrants doing to help me integrate with them? We get this letter from Daniel C. It's important I know my role too, because when you simply smush a lot of people in the same bus together, there's not a lot of cultural exchange going on, and certainly nobody is working at fostering mutual understanding. What would you change, if you could, about the way Albertans and Canadians integrate other cultural groups into our society? What do we need to be doing differently?
Well, I think one of the first things that we need to be doing differently is, I take full responsibility for the fact that some of these cultural communities can be insular, and it doesn't benefit them, and it also certainly doesn't create an atmosphere for others to feel free to relate to them. So some of these ethnocultural communities obviously need to be less insular, and the Canadian Somali community in Alberta has worked quite a bit to open up to the mainstream. I think what needs to happen systematically so that some of these underlying issues are solved is that we need to move away from ghettoization and a multiculturalism with no end. Multiculturalism was supposed to lead to integration and full equality. And the fact that you have second and third generation Canadians of Somali background still being referred to as Somali, to me, is the perfect example of what I'm talking about. At some point, people have to be called Canadians. They obviously have a cultural heritage, just like former Prime Minister Mulroney had an Irish heritage. But I'm a Canadian citizen, and that's what should matter. And the fact that we're still being referred to as Somalis or as Chinese or this and that, right. It's not just a pedantic issue, because that nomenclature actually leads to a marginalization of services, because we're still being provided with immigrant settlement services for newcomers when we are not newcomers. We've been here, you know, all our lives, and so.
And the argument can be made all Canadians are newcomers at some point.
Yeah, so,
Joanne,
well, I know, but I mean, yeah.
Joanne, is this a matter of time? We've got the Statistics Canada figures out now, 2010, saying within 20 years, the visible minority portion of our population, for sure, will be much higher, 1/3. Is it just a matter of time before we truly are one?
Well, it's that question, I think, that Daniel raised there with fostering mutual understanding. As long as a group is viewed as different, is viewed as other, and not like us, whoever the us is, whether the us is men or the us is people who were born here, whoever the us is, as long as there's that division, the marginalization of services, the inequities that we're finding with lots of different ethnocultural groups is going to continue. So it's not just the practice, but it's these sets of ideas that label certain individuals as, I want to say less than, or as very different and distinct.
Suzanne, final thoughts from you. Certainly there are a lot of Albertans who welcome everyone with open arms.
Well, yeah, and we're doing a whole lot of work in the area of developing understanding with the school system, for example, systems that people run into, educating, well, we'd like to work with the police force, for example, to just educate and build understanding so that people aren't lumped together as groups, but are treated as individuals, and
hopefully we solve everything together.
Yeah, exactly.
Suzanne Gross from the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers, Joanne Meinecker, a criminologist with Grant MacEwan University, and in Toronto, Ahmed Hussen, National President of the Canadian Somali Congress. Thank you all so much for joining us.